All right, now let's talk about external validity. And specifically, we're going to talk about the two kinds of external validity, population validity and ecological validity. All right. And the question of external validity is really about whether or not we can generalize our results to other samples or situations. So other populations or other settings, really. Okay. So let's take a look at population validity. So sometimes our results will not be viable for other populations, and that's a problem with population validity, right? That means that this thing was going to have low external validity. All right. So an example would be educational interventions between races or in other schools. So let's say, for example, I've got two groups. I've got an intervention group, a group that I've actually done an intervention with. They're from an Asian, predominantly white, upper middle class suburban school. Okay. And they did extremely well inside of my intervention. And what I want to know is that if I take that intervention and I now use it inside of a classroom where predominantly the students are African American, maybe lower middle class in inner city, right? Am I going to get the same result? So is my intervention, is it going to actually work within the new group, right? Is my experiment going to get the same kind of results within the new group, all right? And so we're going to move that intervention through there. And what we have to ask ourselves is whether or not the intervention that I am using, okay, is in fact, is it race specific? Is it specific to socioeconomic status? Is it specific to what kind of setting in terms of like whether or not it's suburban or inner city, right? And for those of us who work inside of education, right, the field of educational research, the fact of the matter is that those three things, right, if we had, if we wanted to go out and change all three of them, the race of the group of people that we're given the intervention to, the socioeconomic status, and also kind of like whether or not they are suburban, rural, or inner city. If we change all three of those, we shouldn't expect any of the same results. Okay, that's too much change, right? That one group of people, all right, my intervention group is too different from my new group, and so consequently, what I have to say is that this intervention, okay, has low population validity. I can't move it out of its population. So while it may work really, really well inside of another suburban school where the students are predominantly Asian and white, okay, and upper middle class, what I'm not going to be able to do is I'm not going to be able to even move it into a rural school where maybe, most of my students are white or migrant, right? It's not going to work there either. And so that's what we have, what we're talking about when we talk about population validity. If I move it out of the population that I'm working in, am I going to get the same results? Now, sometimes our results are not going to be viable for other scenarios. So let's take this example. We've got ADHD interventions in a pullout versus interventions in a full classroom. And what we want to know is, suppose we want to know if the use of the pre-task protocol will improve attention in a task. And so what we do is we go out and we have it in a pullout and we say, all right, hey, we get great results in the pullout, right? Will I continue to get great results when I move my intervention into a classroom now? Okay. So when I move it into a new setting. So now I'm moving it into a new setting. I'm going for the pullout to the classroom. Well, what we need to do is we need to consider whether or not my intervention is really setting dependent and whether or not the change in setting actually impacts what I'm measuring, right? Well, say the pullout is one-on-one and it has high teacher attention. And over here in the classroom, it's 15 to 1 and it has relatively low teacher attention for each student. She tries her best, but there's 15 for every one of her or him. Okay? So now I'm doing an ADHD intervention, right? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Do you think that I'm going to get different results when I take a student with ADHD from a one-on-one scenario to a 15 to 1 scenario? I think the answer is probably yes. Okay? Right? So the number of students, right? This 1 to 1, the 15 to 1, the number of students really does make a difference in terms of whether or not the student's going to pay attention. It's going to have an impact upon that variable. So probably moving it into the new setting, okay, is going to have impact upon your results. So this intervention has low ecological validity because it is setting dependent. It depends upon the setting that we're in. So those are our two basic types of external validity. External validity really has to do with whether or not we can move our results from the population and the setting that we were in into new populations and new settings. All right, and we've got the two different kinds. The one that has to do with whether or not the one that has to do with if we could change to a new population, and the other one that has to do with whether or not we could change to a new setting. When we're making determinations as to whether or not we have high or low external validity, you have to make a consideration as to what scenario would you be changing it into, right? If you change the setting, would it in fact give you different results doing the same experiment? Okay, so you kind of want to ask those questions, right? If I look at what it is that I'm doing, okay, and then I go in and I change its setting, right? I go into a new area, is that going to change my results? The more the results change due to change in setting, the lower the external validity is, right? The more that the results change when I change it from one population to another, the lower the external validity is. High external validity experiments are ones where no matter what setting you put it into, or no matter what population you put it into, you end up getting the same results. All right, and that completes the conversation about external validity.